Before we jump straight in, I want to take a breath and say thank you, because recently something happened here that I don't take lightly at all. This channel reached a subscriber milestone, and what you built in these comments, in these shares, in these watch-throughs, it's not just an audience, it's a quorum. It's our quiet quorum, and that matters because a quorum is what turns noise into decisions. A quorum is what turns speech into action. It makes power accountable. So tonight we're doing something different, not a normal rundown. This will be a flagship diagnostic, a systems health check, if you will, using the President's State of the Union as the test. And we're going to ask one question over and over. Do we want a strong man's speech or a strong state of our union? And that's where the Quiet Countdown begins. So welcome back, Quiet Quorum. If you're new here, I'm DeAnthony Collins, and this is The Quiet Loud, where we have sober facts, names, dates, receipts, and some pattern recognition. If that's your vibe, hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next diagnostic. So tonight, we're grading claims against reality, line by line, because legitimacy is not a feeling. Legitimacy is our record. The president stood at that lectern and declared the union strong, the border secure, inflation plummeting, and the economy roaring. Now that's the claim. We know what's different. We know what we feel here on the ground. Now here's the diagnostic. Strong governments serve our people. Fragile states serve their own power, and they always need the story to run faster than the evidence can. So we start with the easiest test. Can the speech survive the measurable world? PBS's fact check notes that when Trump claims 0 illegal aliens have been admitted, that doesn't mean no one tried. It's not a magic wall out there. It's a change in what happens to people after the encounters. And when he claims that core inflation is down to numbers like 1.7% in late 2025, Reuters inflation reporting still shows key measures running way above target, with core PCE estimates around high 2s to low 3s. He brags gas is below $2.30 in most states. I mean, heck, I've heard him talk about gas being as low as $1.99, $1.98. But AAA's national average in February is closer to the high $2 range. Not a countrywide $2.30 reality. That's not happening. So this is our first pattern. Broad, triumphal claims that dissolve when you check the actual meter. And when the meter contradicts the message, the incentive is not to fix conditions, it's to control who gets believed. A strong government can tolerate that measurement, while a fragile state treats measurement like an enemy, right? Enemy of the people. We've heard that quite a bit since Trump came into the fray. And now that we've established the diagnostic, we move to where the system gets tested the hardest, the monopoly on force. So Trump's State of the Union repeats the frame that they protect citizens, they treat immigration as an invasion, and demand full and immediate funding for homeland security. But in a strong democracy, force is limited by law, transparency, and consent, not foregoing judicial warrants to issue some memo to yourself that is hardly an enforceable warrant. But in a fragile one, force expands like that, and communities find out after the fact, like the presidential memo NSPM 7, that can basically turn protesters into domestic terrorists, which is that language that we hear all the time coming from the DHS secretary and from Trump himself. I mean, just look at the reporting. Local and state officials have been blocking and complicating ICE plans to convert warehouses into mass detention sites, including deals that collapse when sellers back out or cities push back. Maryland sued the Trump administration over ICE facility construction, another example of states using courts as a brake when federal power accelerates. And the Washington Post described a small Georgia town organizing against a proposed mega facility. Now we're talking a facility that would house over 5,000 people, maybe even more. Sometimes the size matches a small town's population. So their local capacities, their water systems, their schools, their police are being asked to absorb federal detention scale with minimal consent. They don't get to have a say. That's not border security. That's federal force infrastructure starting to spread across the country, which is why this matters. Legitimacy is not whether you can build it. Legitimacy is whether a free people are allowed to meaningfully decide it. When the government starts warehousing people at scale with no plan for due process, with no plan for release, the real question becomes who gets to say no. And when local communities become the last line of constitutional friction to save us, that's not stress. That's not strength. That's stress. It's stress on HHS, on our health and human services. It's stress on the power grids, on the water systems, on the schools, on the police. Now let's talk about the economy, because failing states don't just use force. They use financial pressures. So Trump's State of the Union claims that inflation is plummeting, that incomes are rising, and mortgages are dramatically cheaper. But here's the reality check. Inflation remains above the Fed's target, and key measures like core PCE are still estimated near 3%, in the 3% neighborhood somewhere. I mean, plummeting is some political spin. And that's being generous. Not a settled condition for families out here. And yeah, mortgage rates have eased, but even Freddie Mac's own data still has a 30-year mortgage around 6%, which is better than it had been, but is nowhere near cheap. Meanwhile, AAA's February national gas average is roughly the high $2 range. Again, not the most states under $2.30 world that the speech is painting. Now watch how fragile governance shows itself. Because when conditions are mixed, leaders with legitimacy say, here's where we're still hurting. But leaders protecting their own power say, I've solved it. Stop talking about this. It's over. Or it's a hoax. Things that we've been hearing from this administration. Or I'll tell you in 2 weeks. That's another one. And the moment you declare the pain imaginary, you just punish the messengers. Whoever else is saying it is, they're out to get you. They're the enemy, right? Strong states, again, serve the people. So affordability is a central priority. Weaker ones serve their own power. So affordability becomes propaganda. If your grocery bill is the same, but the speech says that you're thriving, that's not just an optimistic speech. That's a warning light telling you that this person will lie to you, is lying to you. And the fastest way to force the public to accept that disconnect is to destabilize the institutions that adjudicate those facts, which brings us to the courts and the tariff ruling. In the State of the Union transcript itself, Trump complains about an unfortunate ruling from the United States Supreme Court on the tariffs, meaning even in his victory lap, the court show up as a constraint against him. Reuters reports the Supreme Court struck down Trump's global tariffs, and then U.S. Customs prepared to stop collecting those tariffs because they were deemed illegal. Because law still exists when institutions will enforce it. But it also has been reported that the ruling doesn't end uncertainty for trade partners, because unpredictability is not just a side effect, it's the politics of their leverage. And receipts under the IEEPA-based tariffs were enormous. Penn Wharton is estimating massive revenue collected. So this is an abstract. It hits prices and paychecks. So here's the institutional cohesion test. Can the system impose limits on the executive without the executive declaring the limit itself illegitimate? Separations of power. Because that's where fragile states tip when the rule of law becomes the rule of their leader. Courts aren't the deep state. Courts are what a strong country uses to keep power inside the lines. And when leaders teach their base that every constraint is some kind of sabotage, the next move is to remove the constraints, which is why we pivot to the civic system, our elections, and who the speech asks you to trust. Legitimacy rests on lawful authority that people recognize as fair, especially our elections. And the speech doesn't just sell outcomes, it sells distrust. So power can be consolidated for your protection. CBS's fact-checking notes that Trump made claims around cheating and elections in the State of the Union environment because that story is not going away. He's trying to normalize it. Now contrast that with a real metric of Democratic mood. Democrats scored an upset in a win. Democrats scored an upset with Texas. Democrats scored an upset win in a Texas state Senate special election with a double-digit margin, flipping a seat Republicans had held for decades. That's not rigged. That's voters moving en masse visibly and purposefully because they don't like what you're doing. Look at the polls. When they work for you, you're always out here saying my polls are great. When they are against you and underwater, they're all fake news. But what we do know is that when voters move, leaders with legitimacy start to compete. And leaders protecting themselves try to change the rules, discredit the referees, and prosecute the opposition. If your politics can't survive voters changing their minds, then you don't have a party. You have a permission structure for your own power, which is why the People's State of the Union matters so much here. Not as entertainment, but as a counterweight. MoveOn reports millions of views and a major boycott presence by members of Congress in the MeidasTouch MoveOn counterprogramming, meaning the public record is being contested in real time. They stood outside the Capitol building and put on this. That was pretty awesome. Now, let's go global, because a failing state pattern doesn't stay domestic for long. And Trump has been publicly involved in talk of ceasefires and deals. And the test here is simple. Is any of it working? Do the outcomes match the announcements? Thank you for your attention to this matter. Trump said Putin agreed to halt strikes on Kyiv for a week. Then reporting also describes Russia halting for a few days and then unleashing heavy attacks on Kyiv shortly after. That's the global legitimacy pattern. Announcements without enforcement creates false security, and that false security turns around and gets people killed, civilians that did not sign up for some stupid war. And it corrodes trust because allies watch whether the United States is stabilizing reality or just narrating it. That's why Center for Foreign Relations style analysis of countries reacting to the tariff ruling matters too, because credibility isn't just what you say at home. It's what the world believes you'll do when it costs you something. A strong country doesn't perform strength. It produces stability. We used to be a beacon of that stability, projecting strength, not performing it. And if the headline is always deal, but the metric is always strike, then the system is not getting stronger. It's getting looser. It's getting more scary, more precarious around the world. Which brings us back to the civil rights through line we've been establishing here. The country has seen this movie before, and it always ends the same way unless people get up and intervene. No more standing in the middle. No both sides. No saying washing. No lesser of two evils false dichotomy. Stop falling for it. We can't afford to. So one last thing. Couple things for your radar, and then we'll get out of here. Shutdown pressure is not theoretical. This thing is happening. Travel and airline groups are warning a shutdown would push TSA screeners into working without pay and raise the risk of disruptions. Okay? We've seen this happen during the last shutdown. There were people who were calling out sick, not coming to work, whatever else, and that makes so that people aren't able to travel. And I, for one, can't blame them. When we take on a job, we do so for compensation. And when the compensation stops, there is no reason to continue work. Whether you are an essential worker or not, that pay is essential to your livelihood. Okay? So it matters a great deal. DHS emergency measures are already spilling into daily life. DHS paused programs like PreCheck and Global Entry as part of shutdown responses, but then reverse course, showing how brittle the system gets when the funding breaks down. I'm just surprised at how are they using this money? DHS is the most heavily funded department in all of government right now. Where's the money going? They should be able to have the money that they got through the big ugly bill, right? There should still be enough money, but you know what we're hearing? There's some video of some of these masked agents telling people they don't care what's going on. They're making $200,000. What is happening right now? Okay? So that definitely shows when they're reversing course on things like that, that shows how brittle the system gets when the funding breaks down, funding that they should have, but that's institutional resistance, and it's happening right in plain sight. Catholic investors saying that the GEO Group rejected a shareholder vote seeking scrutiny of alleged human rights tied to ICE detention operations, meaning even inside the Capitol system, there's a fight over accountability, and it needs to happen. But the counter record is massive. Like I said before, MoveOn says that the People's State of the Union hosted by Joy Reid and Katie Fang crossed millions of views and became part of an organized alternative civic narrative. So kudos to all involved with that. The hosts, the elected officials who spoke, the guests that they brought with them, because they weren't the only ones. There were other creators and there were other journalists who were all doing the same thing, telling truth, showing receipts. Okay? And so anyone that was able to turn their attentions away from the lies spoken at that Capitol on Tuesday night was appreciated in my book. The intervention path is democratic. We need to win the midterms. Winning the midterms gets us the gavels. Getting the gavels gives us subpoena power. That subpoena power gives us budget control. That budget control returns the legislative guardrails, and those guardrails gives us the ability to repair bad policy, to repair our alliances around the world, and to restabilize our economy domestically and globally. That's not a slogan, guys. I'm not running for anything. That's just what the jurisdiction will be. But here's a bit of homework should you choose to accept it. Like this video first and foremost, please. And then subscribe if you haven't. Please check. We could use it. Join the quiet quorum, guys. Share it also with one person who needs the diagnostic and not the dopamine. And pick one action. Call your representatives. Volunteer. Support local candidates. Help register voters. And stay relentlessly informed, because they're going to try to change things on us. They're going to try to scare us. They're going to try to give us false information, keeping us confused and scared. Let's not be. Let's help each other stay informed. Let's share information. I'm Anthony Collins, and as always, I'm going to ask you to stay grounded, stay informed, and stay loud, quietly. This is The Quiet Loud. Y'all take care.